So, I think it's pretty safe to assume that the concept of grace doesn't come up readily during your lunch breaks or when you're hanging out having your favorite latte, right? But the funny thing is, the idea of grace is replete throughout our everyday vocabulary. Now, in his book, What's So Amazing About Grace, Philip Yancey makes this observation. Quote, many people say grace before meals, acknowledging daily bread as a gift from God. We are grateful for someone's kindness, gratified by good news, congratulated when successful, gracious in hosting friends. When a person's service pleases us, we leave a gratuity. In each of these uses, I hear a pang of childlike delight in the undeserved. I also learn about a word from its opposite. Newspapers speak of communism's fall from grace. We insult a person by pointing out the dearth of grace. You ingrate. We say, or worse, you're a disgrace. A truly despicable person has no saving grace about him. A person who offends the U.S. government by some act of treachery is officially proclaimed persona non grata, a person without grace. But yet, if you ask someone, well, what exactly is grace, they will scratch their head. In fact, a famous theologian, Augustine of Hippo, when asked to explain what grace is, he says, quote, what is grace? I know until you ask me. When you ask me, I don't know. And so, for some reason, it's hard for our brains to wrap around this idea of grace. So what we're going to do, we're going to start at the most baseline level of the definition, and we're going to work our way up. All right? So if you do a basic Google search for the New Testament concept of grace, if you do your Googles, right, you will get the word charis. And the word charis means unmerited favor. Now, the word unmerited means not deserved or merited. Favor means approval, support, or liking for someone or something. So when we're talking about unmerited favor, we're talking about an undeserved support from Yahweh. In David Guzik's book, Standing in Grace, what he does, he decides to look at how is this word charis used, not only in the Bible, but in the Greco-Roman world during the first century in which many of these epistles were written in. And he says this, quote, the word charis was also used in association with supernatural power or aid. In the literature of ancient Greece, charis was sometimes seen as a mystical power that supernaturally influenced the personality of man with its goodness and beauty. Sometimes this was thought to be like a magic spell, unseen and supernatural, yet full of power. It was common for the ancients to think of the gods or God bestowing this supernatural grace upon man. Aristotle defines it as helpfulness towards someone in need, not in return for anything, nor that the helper may get anything, but for the sake of the person who is helped. So it is a supernatural connect that you have. You know, back in the days we would say it's the hookup. You know, maybe somebody has you in their friends and family plan. You know, maybe you just know somebody who can get you that thing, you know, below cost. You know, a connect, a hookup, or as the kids say today, the plug. Right? And if you live in New York City for any stretch of time, and you have a conversation or you overhear a conversation about a situation that needs to be handled, chances are in that conversation, somebody's going to come and tell you that, well, I know a guy who knows another guy, right? It's having this connection with somebody that can look out for you, that can give you things that everybody else can't really get, right? This is a part of what grace is. And me doing this research about grace, you know, going into these ivory towers where the academics reside, they could be very cold and clinical, except when they start talking about grace. All of a sudden, they get all warm and fuzzy inside. And instead of being real technical with their definitions, they start talking about the experience of grace. And they start telling stories about grace, about how it impacted them and others, so that the most clinical of theologians becomes a storyteller. Anybody know who this guy is? That's right, that's Slick Rick the Ruler, MC Ricky D. Considered the best storyteller within the hip-hop canon. Why am I bringing that up? If you can tell a story, you could be well known. And the reason why you become well known by telling stories is that stories help us to understand deep and complex things. Something abstract is hard to comprehend, but if someone could put it in a story, you can comprehend it. So, since grace seems to be an abstraction for us, guess what time is it, boys and girls? That's right. So what we're going to do now, we're going to look at a couple of parables that you may or may not ascribe to grace, and we're going to glean some more understanding about grace itself. Amen? All right, first parable, the parable of the lost sheep. We all know this story, right? The shepherd leaves the 99 for the one. Very problematic story. Why do I say that? Well, it's rare that you have 100% of everything. So if you have 99% of something, you're doing pretty good for yourself. If all you can get is a 99 in every exam, chances are you're going to graduate with honors. If you're a professional athlete and you score 99% of the time, chances are we're going to be wearing your sneakers and you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. But yet the shepherd leaves the 99 for the one. What makes that one sheep so special? He's not that bright because he's not with the other 99. The 99, they know what to do. They're exactly where they need to be. But yet the shepherd leads them, the ones that know what's going on, to get the one that doesn't know. It doesn't make sense, and it's not fair. Second parable, the parable of the lost son, otherwise known as the prodigal son. We know the story as well. Son goes to his dad, says, "Dad, I can't wait for you to die, so I need my cut of the inheritance now." And the dad gives it to him. And the son goes to town, and he goes to town. It becomes what they call now a lituation. It's a lit situation. It's a lituation. And he's having a great time. He's turned up. And after a series of horrible life decisions, squanders all his money, falls in his face, and decides, you know what? Let me go back to my dad. Maybe I could incur some grace from him. And he does. And the dad sees him, and the dad doesn't shun him, doesn't curse him, runs, hugs him, gives him a new ring, a new robe, and we're going to slay the fattened calf, and we're going to celebrate your return. And the other son's like, hold up, Pops. Wait a minute. Time out. This dude brought disgrace to the family name. They still talk about me when I go to the market. They say, ain't that the brother of so-and-so? That's sad, right? But yet you give him all these things? I've been here since day one. I've done everything you want me to do. What makes him so special? I've been the obedient one. I've been here. You never give me a fattened calf so I can hang out with my friends. It doesn't make sense, and it's not fair. And you know what? He's right. So grace is God's version of a quote that Bill Gates made once. And that is, life's not fair, get used to it. It's God's version. It is as if God has given us the cheat codes to the game of life. You know, when you play a video game, there's certain boards you have to go to, certain bosses you have to defeat, and after each challenge you get a new weapon or a new, right? But with God's grace, you get everything you need at the beginning of the game. You get the sword and the laser cannon, and you get the jetpack and the force field, whatever you need. Now, you still got to play the game. It's still going to be challenging, but you have everything you need to do well in this game. So, is it really hard to comprehend grace? Is it really? I don't think it is. I don't think that's the challenge for us. The challenge isn't comprehension. The challenge is there's a competing version of life is not fair that the world has. And the difference between what the world has and what God has is that in God's grace and favor, we would say, well, God, who am I that I should just get everything? The world says, well, who do you think you are that you should get anything? And you know what happens? We believe the world's version. It's not a problem of comprehension. You just believe the world as opposed to God. And when you believe that, well, I'm not such a big deal. And you agree with the world. And when you make that agreement, you marginalize yourself. You devalue yourself. And once you do that, you're now vulnerable to all sorts of manipulation by the world. And the world says, well, we have some favor for you. If you come from the right family, right gender, right skin tone, you married the right spouse who also comes from the right family, have the right career, go to the right school, go to the right zip code, have the right house, have the right kids, check enough boxes, couple mics here, Ben over there, and then maybe we'll show you some favor. Kanye West, in a freestyle in a concert, said this: I sold my soul to the devil. I know it's a crappy deal. At least it came with a few toys like a Happy Meal. Pray for Kanye. But he gets it. He gets it. He knows dealing with the world is a bad proposition. But yet he's willing to take it because he gets a few toys. And we have made the same decision. As Christians. But God says, you don't have to compromise. You don't have to bend. I will give you everything up front. And the only box you have to check is, do you want this gift? Yes or no? But yet, we believe the world. We don't believe in grace. Well, let me change that. You believe in one aspect of grace. You believe in the forgiveness of sins. But that's the entrance into grace. It's not the totality of grace. But we're very happy staying at the foyer of God's palace. And God says, no, come in. I got all this stuff to show you. You're like, no, I'm good. I'm good right here. I'm fine. Thank you. And I fear that we see God's forgiveness in a worldly fashion. We see it as, I just got over. Or it's my get out of jail free card. As opposed to what it really is, which is, while we were still sinners, God died for the ungodly. And we stay at the door, and we never go in. And then you wonder why your Christianity is not helping you, that your discipleship lacks any power. And then you doubt the Bible, you doubt Christ. Maybe he didn't exist. Maybe my atheist friends are correct. And it's not that. It's that you don't believe in what's been made available to you. The reason why you're not effective isn't comprehension. It's belief. Believe that there's a God who loves you so much that will give you everything despite of who you are. Amen. And this power is amazing. Paul had no problem receiving the cheat codes. We see in Corinthians 15, starting in verse 9, he says, for I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Now, we don't have time to go through all the exploits of Paul, but he's done some things. He's dealt with some things. He's bared under some amazing trials and tribulations. But yet here we are, 2,000 years later, and we get to know grace because of his experience of grace when he went down that road in Damascus. People should know grace because of your example. Why haven't they? It's not because you don't understand. It's not a lack of comprehension. It's that you have sided with the world as opposed to God. There's power here. There's power in grace. Grace that came from the veins of God encased in flesh and was hung on a cross for you. You have the cheat codes. You have the ability to not only play this game, but beat it if you embrace God's grace. Amen? So, before we wrap it up, we have a couple questions I would like to throw out as we get together in our small groups. The first question is, and it's actually kind of a challenge at the same time, it says, share your own grace parable. Tell a time when God has shown you grace and how did it feel? And the second question is, what is one thing that prevents you from embracing God's grace? Again, share your own grace parable. Tell a time when God has shown you grace and how did it feel? And second, what is one thing that prevents you from embracing God's grace? Thank you.